Hello and welcome to Food Allergy and Your Kiddo. I'm your host, Dr. Alice Hoyt, fresh back from the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology conference in Philadelphia, and it was really a very, very, very good conference. I wrote a piece on about the conference on Doximity, which is this doctor social media medical focused platform. So any of my doctor listeners, hi, check out your Doximity for an article, and I'll post a link to it in the show notes because really what I went into in the article was the value of colleagues and growing relationships with colleagues, and how one of my mentors many moons ago gave me some very, very good advice about every time you go to a conference, meet somebody new. And I'm really seeing the fruits of that really start to bloom. And it was really lovely to see so many of my colleagues, my friends in Philadelphia and talk shop, talk life. It was awesome. What was also awesome is that when we go to these conferences, we as allergists, then we're hearing some of the coolest updates when it comes to food allergy. And what I want to talk about today is a concept that I talked about last year about omalizumab being superior to oral immunotherapy for food allergy. And really, what I'm going to go through in this episode, because I did talk about this in a different episode, but they had another press release this year, like they had a press release last year. They being the Academy for what really like awesome new data is being presented at the conference. Like that's great, like right, cutting edge science. That's what we want. Um, More data from the Outmatch study was released. And the Outmatch study is the study that got Xolair, omalizumab, approved by the FDA to be used for food allergy. And I'll also put a link to an article I wrote last year for my Food Allergy Pediatric Hub, which is a non-allergist doctor-focused resource. It really has so much good information. I write a newsletter that's specifically for pediatricians, nurse practitioners who are caring for kids who have food allergies, but they're not living day in, day out in the allergy space. So this is like general pediatricians. Um, and so last year I wrote an article titled, "Is Xolair Superior to OIT for Treating Food Allergies?" Because last year the big headline was, "Oh, this study shows that Xolair is superior to OIT for treating food allergies." And I just do not believe that that is the case. And we'll talk about why. This year's press release was omalizumab is as effective as multi-food oral immunotherapy for allergenic food tolerability. And the big takeaway is that more than 60% of participant dietary consumption plans showed no significant difference between omalizumab and multi-food oral immunotherapy success rates after 12 months. But why some people are in the camp of omalizumab is better than OIT is because omalizumab, you get your shot or shots, depending on depending on your dosing, and you don't have to do all the effort and have the risk of the updosing and the dosing of every day with OIT. And if you just look at it like that, like, oh, well, yeah, I don't want to risk having a reaction. Of course, I'm just going to do a shot. Then, like, yeah, I get it. Why you would think that, well, this shot is so much better than OIT. But let's really dive into the study some to see, is the shot better than OIT? And spoiler alert, I don't necessarily think the shot is better, and I don't necessarily think that OIT is better. I don't necessarily think SLIT is better. I don't necessarily think avoidance is better. What is best is what's the right treatment plan for the patient. The right treatment plan might be omalizumab. It might not be. The right treatment plan might be oral immunotherapy. It might not be. So I think we all need to get away of what's best, right? Until we have a cure. A cure. A cure is something where you have the condition, you apply the treatment, the condition goes away, you remove the treatment, and the condition doesn't come back. Now, what they are suggesting strongly in this article, in the Outmatch study, is that when you get the food in the diet with Xolair on board, then most kids are able to tolerate the food indefinitely while on Xolair. And then even when you stop Xolair, a lot of kids are able to tolerate a lot of their allergen to a point of freely eating, which is very awesome. That is very cool. It's not all kids, though. And we don't have the long term data to really show, okay, this is a sustained unresponsiveness. Sustained unresponsiveness means that you've undergone some form of treatment for your food allergy, and then you've stopped the treatment, and then you have an ingestion challenge, meaning you eat the food again and you don't have any allergic reaction. Now, with omalizumab, they didn't do okay, well, let's stop the food now. They stopped the Xolair. They said, okay, keep eating the food. And a lot of kids were doing great. Though when you look at the chart over time, it does seem like some of that tolerance is going away, meaning kids are not tolerating the food anymore, meaning kids are reacting. Not ideal, right? Nobody, no one in my world wants to be in the seat of saying, oh, your kid might react, right? Like, we want to live in as much certainty as we can, and we can't always live in certainty, during which time we are having shared open communication, very transparent about the risks, benefits, and alternatives of a potential treatment plan. So, what I talked about last year, and again, I'm going to put a link to this article. And also, if you don't subscribe to the Joyful Living newsletter, which is my parent focused newsletter, then subscribe to that at foodallergyandyourkiddo.com, because I'll have a link to this in a newsletter coming up too. So basically, the way the Outmatch study worked, there were 3 stages to it. And I won't belabor this. Go back and listen to the other podcast on this from last year. You really should. And you're going to love this article um, on Food Allergy Peds Hub. I'm a very visual person, so I put some good visuals in it. But basically, how the Outmatch team studied whether or not, or how Xolair and OIT compared to each other. It was really in stage 2 of the study, where everybody got omalizumab for a total of 8 weeks. And then after this kind of like run in to have omalizumab on board, then the kiddos, the subjects, were stratified into one of 2 cohorts. The multi-allergen OIT, and they continued omalizumab injections for 8 weeks. And then they continued the OIT, but then they went to placebo injections for 44 weeks. So they had more Xolair, and they started OIT, real OIT, not placebo. The other group, they started placebo OIT, continued omalizumab also for another 8 weeks. But then after those 8 weeks, they went to a placebo OIT and just omalizumab. So then what happened? Well, then the results were, in the intention to treat analyses, subjects who received Xolair and placebo OIT were significantly more likely to meet primary outcomes, meaning if they did Xolair and the placebo OIT, so they weren't really doing OIT, they were just doing placebo, they were more likely to reach the primary outcome, which was to consume about 4,000 milligrams of all 3 foods. To put that into perspective, that's about a tablespoon of peanut butter. A serving size of peanut butter is 2 tablespoons, is about 7 grams or 7,000 milligrams. So this was a little bit more than half of that. Still like legit. That's great, right? That's awesome. That's a lot of peanut butter. Now that group, the Xolair versus placebo OIT, they were more likely eat a lot more peanut butter than they were when they started. When they started, they couldn't even eat a whole peanut without reacting. Now that's compared to the kiddos who received OIT and placebo Xolair. However, that's the intention to treat. Intention to treat means, okay, these are the numbers of kiddos who did the study. And we're going to include all the kids who even had to stop the study because of reactions, which about half of the kids in the OIT group had to stop because they were reacting to the OIT. When you look at the per protocol, though, so those kids who were able to tolerate the OIT protocol, they did just as well as the kids who did Xolair. So what's up with the OIT protocol? Like, well, clearly this is saying that OIT is not a good option. Well, that's when the devil is in the details, right? So when you really look at how was OIT defined, how was it planned, what was the OIT protocol? It is not a protocol that anybody doing OIT uses. It was a very aggressive protocol. And I have a great side by side on this article that compared the Outmatch OIT protocol to Palforzia, which yes, Palforzia is going away, but Palforzia really like made the framework of a great foundation for how to do OIT. Is it perfect? No. But is it probably the most well-studied OIT protocol? Yeah. Yeah. So let's call Palforzia's protocol sort of the standard. In Palforzia's protocol, you do an escalation day, which means in one day, you do 0.5 milligrams of the allergen, and then you wait a little bit in the office. Then you do 1 milligram, then 1.5, then 3, then 6 milligrams. And to put this in perspective, this is Palforzia. This is for peanut allergy. In one peanut, there's about 250 to 300 milligrams of peanut protein. So in this Palforzia protocol, which is one of the most well-accepted OIT protocols in the world, you start with 0.5 milligrams. You do this little escalation day, which we can talk about the science of that and whether that's necessary. My point is, the max dose that day is 6 milligrams. You end up consuming about 12 milligrams, still significantly less than an actual peanut, right? And then you're updosing. Come in the next day, you start your updosing at 3 milligrams. You do 3 milligrams every day for 2 weeks. And no sooner than 2 weeks, come back in the office, you go up to 6 milligrams, then 12, then 20, then 40, then 80. And you stick with not increasing it more than 40 milligrams. 40, 80, 120, 160, 200, 240, up to 300 milligrams. And that's the maintenance dose because that's about one peanut. And the whole concept with Palforzia, when it was being developed, was, well, let's get kids to being bite safe, meaning if they ate a peanut, they wouldn't have a severe life-threatening allergic reaction. So if you're doing 300 milligrams of peanut protein every day, that's the equivalent of one peanut. Okay, so that is one escalation day and 11 updoses. And this is Palforzia. OIT allergists do variations of this. But I'll tell you, this about 10 to 15 steps updosing to about 300 milligrams, keeping kids on 300, 500 milligrams. Sometimes allergists go up higher for maintenance. Sometimes we get kids to a maintenance and then space out updosing to then get them to freely eating more quickly than if we just had them on maintenance for a year and then recheck their labs and then consider it an ingestion challenge. This is an art. This is why medicine is an art, is because you're using science to inform how you're treating the patient in front of you. All this to say, even with Palforzia, that protocol, some kids still have reactions. Some kids, you have to step back. You have to slow down. You have to not updose instead of every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks, right? Space it out. Give the immune system time. So what did they do in Outmatch? They didn't do that. They started with, dose 1 was 3 milligrams. Fine. I don't have a problem with that. I'm fine with that. The next dose was 30 milligrams. So they didn't do 3 to 6 to 12 to 40. They went 3 to 30. Oh, okay. Okay. And then we're at 60. And then we're at 125. And then dose 5 is 250 milligrams. Dose 5. We're at 250 milligrams at dose 10. And these are at least 2-week intervals. The max dose for OIT and outmatch was 1,000 milligrams, which fine. I'm totally down with 1,000 milligrams being a maintenance dose. But I will tell you, not all kids can get there that quickly. And that's exactly what we saw in outmatch. That even with that leading into starting OIT, they had omalizumab on board. And yes, omalizumab takes maybe 6 months-ish to get out of the system. So in theory, they had OIT, they had Xolair on board, and then they stopped the Xolair and started the OIT. Um, Actually, when they started the OIT, they still had Xolair on board for another 8 weeks, and then they stopped it. This outmatch OIT protocol was way too aggressive. Now, what's very cool is half the kids tolerated it, so that's very cool. um, we can learn so much from that because we're constantly thinking about how can we make a kid's life better? How can we minimize the number of updoses a child needs? That's where we still need so much more research to answer these questions. So that, if a family, if they don't need to come in for 15 updoses, they only need to come in for 10 updoses, like that's amazing, right? This protocol was way too aggressive to truly compare OIT to omalizumab. So if they were truly going to compare them, as I said last year, please do an evidence-based OIT protocol and literally compare the two. And then I want so bad that to say that we can put kids on Xolair for X amount of time, get them eating their allergen regularly, and then stop the Xolair. And then all of those kids who were eating their allergen will continue to be able to safely eat their allergen indefinitely. I want that so bad. I hope the data pans out to that. We're still waiting for that. Immunologically, it if the food is in the diet while someone's on Xolair, so let's say we put them on Xolair, that allows them to start freely eating the food. When you start freely eating the food, or when you start ingesting the food, that is what causes your immune system to grow tolerance to the food. Xolair is preventing the immune system from having an allergic reaction to the food. But current state, we're not seeing where Xolair is actually doing something alone to grow tolerance. Now, is it amazing when we have a kiddo who's having some reactions to their OIT and we add Xolair and then they just are cruising? They get to freely eating, they're opening their diet. And then we're starting to pull back the Xolair, and then, oh, maybe they're starting to have some symptoms. So let's put it back on. Let's give the immune system time while we are doing something disease modifying, which I am in the camp that the oral immunotherapy, sublingual immunotherapy, the patches coming out, that these immunotherapies of allergen exposure, low dose allergen exposure over time, that is what is growing the tolerance, while Xolair is helping to support that immune milieu that the kiddo will not have reactions. So can we please stop saying one is better than the other? The best one is the one that is right for this particular child that is in front of you. And what is so amazing, and let's all come together and be really excited that we have options now. We have options now. The other thing that struck me in this meeting is that this year, the way they did this presentation, it was very cool. It was Dr. Bob Wood, who is a contributed significantly to this field. Well done, sir. Thank you. And Dr. Corinne Keat, who is amazing, and I totally fangirl over her. I mean, she's done some very, very cool work, and she is his protege. He said that she was his favorite fellow. A fellow is an allergist in training. She is no longer in training. She's a boss. So he had the pro, like, yeah, Xolair is so much better than OIT, and she had the con argument of, nope, OIT is better. And these are pro-con debates that the academy and other organizations they put on to have both sides really brought out, even though one side might be really in the other camp, but being able to bring out the pros and the cons of everything. And what really came out, not just in that talk, but in other discussions, is that the definition of OIT is very different depending on who you're talking to. So some allergists who are very much in the academic world and have not been exposed to what I call supermarket OIT, meaning go to store, buy peanut butter, come in, we desensitize with that. Pasteurized liquid egg whites, like real foods, like bring in the real food, and that's what we use to teach your child's immune system to tolerate it. That is still a very foreign concept to some academic institutions, because the concept of using a non-FDA approved fill in the blank food, treatment, medication, whatever you want to call this, the concept of using just straight peanut butter that a mom brings from her house to desensitize a child is very like, what? We can't use a non-FDA approved product. Everything has to go through the FDA. Doctors are trained to make medical decisions. And while the FDA serves a very important purpose, it does not serve the purpose of replacing a doctor's expertise. And the concept that something like peanut butter is not adequate to be used to treat a child's peanut allergy, we've got to get past that, because the evidence very clearly shows that real food OIT, supermarket OIT, works. It works. Families like it, right? I mean, there's a reason Palforzia is going away. It's not because it wasn't effective, because it was. It wasn't because of quality issues. It was fine. But allergists don't need it because we can use what's in the kids' pantry. So I hope you have enjoyed today's episode. And I'm going to put, like I said, I'm going to put this article from last year where I wrote on Food Allergy Peds Hub, because it has the really good graphics, in the show notes. And I want you to take away from this episode that the right treatment for your child is the right treatment for your child. It's not necessarily the right treatment for somebody else. Somebody else's treatment is not necessarily the right treatment for your child. And every child deserves personalized, evidence-based medical recommendations. And you can have two kiddos who are both 7 years old, both have peanut and egg allergies, and they need two very different treatment plans. And that's okay. And what's so amazing is that we're living in a world where we have omalizumab, right? We have Xolair. We have OIT. We have SLIT. We have options and more options to come. God bless you. God bless your family.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, I'm an allergist, but I'm not your allergist. So talk with your allergist about what you learned today. Like, subscribe, share this with your friends, and go to foodallergyinyourkiddo.com where you can join our newsletter. God bless you, and God bless your family.